it's always weird to introduce myself, but I'll give it a try. Maybe I won't be complete. But my name's Shane Bugbee. I've been doing counterculture communications and artwork for over 30 years. And I've worked with a lot of serial killers. I helped with the Gacy book, Question of Doubt. I did a cookbook with Dorothea Puente called Cooking with Serial Killer, Recipes from Dorothea Puente. I did a book called Bomb-Ass Recipes from Bill Ayers and Bernadine Dorn. They were part of the Weather Underground. And now I did this book on stealing the Gein's headstone.
I actually have Dorothy's cookbook.
Oh, really?
Yes, I've glanced through. I've had it for years. Trying to think when I bought it. It's been a couple of years ago, I would say. I didn't know you were part of that.
Oh, yeah, that's my book.
Huh, that's interesting. So you stole Ed Gein's tombstone?
You know, it's so hard to say yes to that, but I'm imagining the statute of limitations is up on this. It's been over 20 years, right? 25 years?
Mm-hmm. So
you could say I appropriated it. The word stole is so it's a hard one because there's no one. I didn't steal it from the person's dead.
Yeah. So
I didn't really steal it from anyone. And in my book, you'll find one of the Warden family members. When we were talking about things, it was a heated exchange, and I said, "Well, I did get the stone out of your town," and they agreed that was a good thing. So most of the people up there don't like the Gein thing, don't like the Gein reputation. So when I did what I did, I was up there visiting, like as a true crime person, I was interested in true crime and working in that true crime collectible business. And I saw the stone, and it was all, garbage around it, graffiti on it. And I look over my shoulder, and there's a little old lady and what looked like her son putting flowers on a grave, and everything else was a respectful graveyard. It was not a ghouly place. It was just people going there to respect their family members, departed family members. And so I was like, no one is going to be bothered if I take this stone from here and bring it, and bring it to people who want it, like true crime folks, goth folks, my friends. And so I didn't feel I was stealing it necessarily as I was doing a favor.
Yeah, my stepdad, like his dad was in the Marines, so they traveled around a lot, and they were in Wisconsin at some point, not too far from that area. And yeah, they said like the whole town, like you said, hated the whole, like, that they were known for that, pretty much. Like, it was a whole regret thing. And I know, like, with the house and everything, it getting burnt down, and because I know they said the locals done it because where they were wanting to do turn into like basically a museum type thing.
Right. So that's the truth. And again, like my brother wrote a foreword for the book, and he talked about the story when we first went up there and how a truck was following us around, an old truck. And then there's more in the book about like talking to some locals that were mad about, like, I took the Gein truck, what was supposedly the Gein truck, on a true crime speaking engagement in Salem, Massachusetts, and the mayor tried to ban us because I had the Gein truck with me. And people in the town, like the guy who owned the Gein truck, lived in Plainfield. But he wasn't a local. He wasn't from there. He moved there.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like one of these people who would have set the house up as a museum. And the locals there were furious. They threatened his life. They said, "We'll kill you if you keep doing this." And they literally, when I called them and asked them about, "Did you threaten his life?" They're like, "Yeah, and we mean it." They were serious. So yeah, they don't like it, and I can understand that. I'm from a big city, so I wouldn't have understood it if I didn't live in a small town and understand, small town pride.
Yeah, that's there's like some local cases around me, and yeah, it's weird. Like you said, big town. Like some towns kind of like take it in, but then like the little towns, it's like they don't want to be known. Like I said, some of the local cases I don't really cover as much because, like you said, you get like threats. It's kind of like, is it worth your time type thing? Even though you're trying to do a good deed on something, and then like trying to keep, you know, a victim's voice out there that's, you know, of a case that wasn't solved, and then people just kind of take backlash on it, which I can see both sides of it though, because sometimes they just probably get tired of it, you know, hearing about it, you know, when they've lost a loved one or something. So it's understandable.
Yeah, you know, I'll tell you, there's something I would like to tell you about that. I was interviewing the assistant state's attorney who put Gacy to death, and he sat down with me and spent some time, and I did an interview with him. It's somewhere on archive.org. But when I told him, I said, you know, I basically said almost the same thing you're saying. You know, I felt, you know, weird about it. And he's like, Shane, you're not doing anything different than every journalist out there is doing. You're just making less money at it. And basically explained, because I don't have a formal education and I'm doing this out of natural interest, naturally asking questions, I'm not seen as a journalist, even though what I'm doing is journalistic. And so what I see you're doing right now is being a journalist. You're just getting the story for people. You're not, like, I never glorified, I never said, be like Gacy. Everyone should act like Gein. I would never act like Gein. I've got problems. I've got issues with my mom too. You know, and I've never thought to do what he did. I've never thought to do what Gacy did. That's never crossed my mind. And when I think about it, I have a lot of feelings, but none of them are pleasure.
Yeah, I think it's what kind of like with the whole true crime culture is like, I've been in true crime since I was a little kid, because like my mom and stuff had books, she watched documentaries and stuff. Like, I just took it further than what she did. Like, I don't correspond with many serial killers or, you know, killers like I used to. Like, I'll write some here. Like, I have some that I've written to for years, but I don't really do it as much like I used to when I first started 12 years ago. And it's just one of those things, like, a lot of people, yeah, like, some people, like, it's more mainstream now. You know, you got all the documentaries coming out, but like at points in time, and still somewhat, people like really question people when they are into it. They're like, oh, you're going to be a serial killer, or, you know, you're supporting what they're doing. Like, my part of it, like, I'm fascinated by how the mind works, and I think like each case you have to look at individually, because yeah, there's some things that you can compare, and then some things you cannot compare, because everybody's wired different. Everybody reacts different to different trauma. Like you said, you have issues. Like, I personally have issues, but I'm not going out doing what they did, you know, so something that might trigger them ain't going to trigger me the way it did them. So I always find it fascinating what makes somebody tick like that.
Well, right. You know, we are individuals, and we do have different reasons and motives why we do things. I've met a lot of people through this business and doing stuff, and there are some people who are genuinely sadistic, and they enjoy and they get pleasure out of, you know, like mean-spirited things. And so, like, I remember selling a Gacy painting to a bondage club. That, you know, the guy, before Gacy was dead, he was like, I go, what are you going to do with this? And he's like, we're putting it in our bondage club, the centerpiece. And I was like, wow, that makes it. Okay, you know, in my head, it didn't make a lot of sense to me, because I didn't see Gacy as a sexual, you know, like, I didn't see it as a sexual. I did, but I didn't, you know, because the story was about him, you know, being gay sex, repressed homosexual. So I understood the sexual component of it, but I didn't find it erotic. I didn't find it sexually exciting for me, but other people do. So we're all different, you know, and I think, like, that comes out in what you do as an artist or journalist, whether you're promoting sadism, whether you are, you know, and I don't want to say good or bad. I don't get into that. Well, you know, I don't know if I did anything for good or bad, but I did it because I wanted to. You know, I did what I did because I wanted to. And I didn't do it because I wanted to be bad, and I didn't do it because I thought people would think me as good. You know, I never cared what people thought. I just was interested. Or like when I took the Tombstone, which all this is really in detail in the book, and I'm very proud of. And I'm going to say the book's title just because we're here doing this. I Stole That Gein's Tombstone, my fascination with America's most notorious killer. I talk a lot about this, but, you know, when I did it, it was like I thought it was a publicity stunt. But as I thought more about it, it was because, my attraction to Gein was because I had a hard upbringing. I had a hard life. And my mother was just like Gein's mother. So I was sort of relating to his life. But I was looking at it like, why didn't I become him? He had the same kind of life as me, so why didn't I do what he did? And so that's sort of why I got into studying. One of the reasons I was interested in serial killer studying. One of the reasons is also, like, I remember going to the Gacy thing when they were digging the place up. The cops were there in the ambulances, and I would hear police talking to, like, fire department people, and they would tell stories of what they found in Gacy's house and stuff like that. But that never made it into the newspapers, and I was always like, why don't they talk about that in the newspapers? Because the journalists were right next to the cops, and the cops were talking to all of them. Like everyone was having conversation. I was just a kid on a bike. And I'm listening to them talk, but it never made it into the newspapers. And so I was like, I wanted to report what was between the lines. They say read between the lines.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's true. And I think some journalists, maybe that's what you're looking for, is what's between the lines, what's between what they're telling us and what I think there's more to the story. And that's what drove me. One of the reasons. I don't think there's ever one reason why people do things. It's certainly not me. I have many reasons. And so, but I explore all this in that book. That's what I thought the book. I just started out to write a blog post when I did the book. Like, I was just going to write something like, hey, I had something to do with this. It's neat. I haven't seen the series. I haven't seen the show at all. Someone sent me clips of it, and they knew it was me because it was viral. When I took the stone, it was all over the world. It was all over the news. It was all in newspapers. So I was just writing a blog post, and as I did, it just got bigger and bigger, and I'm like, I'm going to do a little zine on this. I'm going to do a little book on this, because it just kept growing, my, interest in why did I do this? What was my psychology? And AI makes it real easy to ask questions of your, ask questions, and it was funny because I did something with AI where I was like, I loaded in a bunch of links to Ed Gein and a bunch of his interviews written, and I said, study Ed Gein and how he is and how he communicates and who he is. And I want you to have Ed Gein ask me, 15 questions about, whatever he wants. But, I'm doing a book on stealing the stone. So Ed Gein interviewed me, and we had this conversation back and forth. And I thought it was going to be silly at first, but but son of a gun, in the conversation, Ed Gein got me to say, I think I was attracted to you because my mother's like yours. And the Ed Gein AI character was really not nice. It made me, I was like, man, it was not mean, but it was really smart. It was super smart and asked me questions that were very psychological. And I'm really happy with the book is what I'm saying. I'm pretty happy with it. And I think you'll enjoy it.
Oh yeah, I can't wait to read it. But speaking of that, we had a local serial killer. He didn't kill here though, but he's from here. Well, he moved to Florida and he killed in Florida. He was on death row. He got executed I shouldn't say a couple years ago, been about 6. But
What's his name? Danny Rowling?
No, it was Bobby Joe Long back in the 80s.
Okay.
Yeah, but he's from West Virginia. And I wrote him, and he asked me at the end of it, "Who are you?" I knew that he meant just who, why are you writing me type thing. But when he said that, it almost was like a deeper meaning to me, and it made me question who I was, and that's kind of made me think what you were saying. It really, I had to think deeper on a level of why am I writing this guy? It was very, very fascinating.
Yeah, it is. It is. Asking questions and thinking about things, it is cool and interesting. It's nothing wrong with it, I don't think. And I think what you're doing is cool. So
you said you haven't watched the series yet. Like I said, I want to say episode 4. If you talk to people that, I'm not saying I'm an expert on the case. Ed Gein's case is one of the ones I find most fascinating. And I've read comments of people saying that they had to do that story on there because the original story is boring, which I thought was odd that somebody would say it was boring. But it's not really just what I've watched. There's not a lot of factual stuff in it. And they kind of, which I can see they're paying homage to Leatherface with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Norman Bates with Psycho, with tying in Alfred Hitchcock and all that. I understand all that, but I don't know. Which kind of like with the Dahmer series and stuff, like they're trying to like portray them more in a sense, which of like a good looking guy, you know what I mean? Which Ed Gein just kind of seemed like your typical like handyman around town that like people ask to do, you know, do stuff for around the house for him. Is from, well, more of like whatever, like farm work is the way I always kind of pictured him as from everything I've read.
Well, you know, I talk to a lot of people who are, you know, like true crime, you know, they study true crime and stuff like that. And like, they told me about the series. I understand a lot about it. And I will tell you, I don't watch any true crime anymore because I've seen all the stories 15 times. You know, I've seen Dahmer's story told 25 times already. Mm-hmm. So when some people kept talking to me about Dahmer, and the Dahmer Netflix one, and they were like, you got to watch it. So I watched it, and I really liked it because it was a fresh take on everything. It was different than the 15 Dahmer movies and shorts that have been produced before that. And I like the idea what they're doing with with these stories is they're taking old stories and making them fresh. And it's like when you see something remade, a movie remade. Let's say they're going to remake Goonies. And it's like, or Star Wars, they're going to remake the first Star Wars. It's like, why? So they didn't remake the first Star Wars. They just keep adding on to it and having fresh takes. And I really like that part of movie making, you know, and it's hard to make movies to be like a book or like a real life because you're trying to entertain people visually, you know, so it's not always going to work out to be like the book or like the real story anyway. So I'm actually excited to watch the new Gein series at some point.
Yeah, like I need to finish it. I want to, maybe while I'm off or something. I don't get to watch TV as much as I used to, but because don't they show actually a clip? Is it? Because I've seen a clip of it. Is it like a bunch of teenage kids? It's like them hooking it up, like his, you know, Tombstone up to a truck basically and pulling out with it.
Yes, it was nothing like that.
So it's kind of, like you said, took a fresh take on it just to kind of say, hey, this is what, like, at least did happen. Just the story around it was different.
I think, well, if everyone knew it was me when they saw it, I got 15 emails saying, Shane, you're in the movie. I saw the clips, and it was nothing like that because, you know, we went up there quiet, you know, and I detail this in the book, and I don't want to detail it here necessarily because I want people to buy the book. Mm-hmm. But it was not like that. It was quiet. It was 3 people. We snuck up there and snuck out, you know, and it was scary. It was scary because the idea is that we are in a small town, and there's small town justice. And I was afraid that if we got caught by someone, they would just shoot us and put us in a ditch. We'd never be seen again. And so, you know, we were afraid. That's for sure. It was scary, and it was, you know, it was scary, and you know. And then what the hell, you know, like, and then, you know, like then it's fresh. I stole that Gein's Tombstone, so it's like, what am I going to do with this fucking thing? You know, like someone's going to arrest me. I eventually took it on tour, and in Seattle, the police came and confiscated it. I took it on tour to get publicity, and I did. I got a lot of publicity for the tour, but the Seattle police took it from me. And then I remember calling the Wisconsin sheriff that had it sent to him, and I said, I want my stone back. And he's like, what, you son of a bitch? And I said, listen, you can't prove that's Gein stone. I want my stone back. That's mine. I had it made. And I positioned it that I had it made as a elaborate Hollywood prop. Mm-hmm. You know, because we had to cut the stone in half to take it on tour. It was too heavy to take the full stone. So
where actually is it now? I've heard, like, is it in a museum? That's one thing I read.
Yeah, what I've heard and what I've seen is that it's in, like, the county museum in whatever the county is. Let's say it's Waukesha, Wisconsin, the county that Plainfield is in. Mm-hmm. They have a museum for that area. And I hear it's in the basement of that museum. I know that when it first arrived there, I made grave rubbings. I made a bunch of grave rubbings and would sell them when I had the stone. And I remember that someone made a few grave rubbings and sold them on eBay for a minute, but that stopped. So I'm sure the museum stopped them. They didn't want it done like that. but it hasn't been displayed that I know of. But it probably will at this point. You know, it's become famous, and I don't see why they wouldn't display it. But I'm not of the mind to be afraid of controversial stuff. So, I would display it. So I can't really relate. When you say, like, I can see both sides, I understand both sides, but I don't respect both sides. I don't understand. It's just news. It happened, and I think hiding things makes it more attractive.
Mm-hmm.
Makes it it makes it something it's not. You create a boogeyman by hiding the stone. Putting the stone out there, telling the story, and getting on with life is probably the best idea to do. Hiding the story, censoring things always makes people want to find out more. So it becomes more interesting.
Yeah, that's very true. Because, like, I've always heard, like, people, like, as a young kid, partying, drinking, and then once you become of age where it's legal, you're just like, well, it's not fun anymore. So
right.
It's like people try to, like, dark history is history, whether, you like it or not. That's just the way it is. Like, they talk about, war and all that in schools, and we got to learn that. This is basically, that's dark history as well. That's, battles that we fought. And this is the same concept, just on a smaller scale, I guess you could say, but it's still history. And like I said, some people go with it. Some people, like, for West Virginia, I'm sure you've heard of Mothman. Yeah, Point Pleasant. Like, you go to that town, Mothman galore. Like, you got the statue, you got the Mothman Festival that just happened last month, and you got the Mothman Museum. Like, they live on that story.
Love it.
So it's very fascinating, to go down there. I usually go once a year just to go down there and hang out, and I hadn't got to go this year. I don't know if I'll get to or not. But it's just, which I agree with you though, like, show it. Like, it's something which I was actually surprised. Did you ever hear, it's a couple years ago, I want to say 2023, where they found the tapes of his interviews and actually done a documentary on it?
Well, I saw that stuff a long time ago. I was researching Gein, 30 years ago, so I heard some of those tapes way back then. I don't know how they refound them. Maybe they found more, but I heard a lot of that stuff or read the transcripts of it. I talked to people that I went to Plainfield. I sat at the table that Gein had his last meal at, with the house that he was arrested at. I saw that. I was in the Warden the hardware store before it closed down while they were still selling hardware items. I went up. I do my research. I really, when I do something, I really try to understand it. And so, yeah, I've read a bunch of that stuff. I understand it. Why do you ask?
Just because I know, like you said, I've read the transcripts and stuff, but I've never actually, like, I think it was just a big shock of, like, where they released it. I want to say it said 2019, I think, is supposedly when they found him, and then they play him. So I guess a lot of people was kind of shocked because nobody had really heard his voice. So I'm guessing that was the whole shock factor they were trying to go off of, was, hearing Ed Gein's voice for the first time. Because, back in the 50s, that was kind of like, yeah, violence has always been a part of, the world, but, that's just something fascinating that happened back then with his case.
One thing I know is that I heard his voice 30 years ago, so I know that I've heard clips of that way before I've heard it. I will say, there's a line that Marilyn Manson says, and I can't repeat it exactly, but like, when one person dies, it's no big deal, but when 1 million people die, it's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, either every life is sacred or no lives are sacred, right? Either life is special or it's not. And so that relating to serial killers, I don't think, making Gein and the people that died there a bigger deal than when someone I love dies doesn't make sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know those people. It's like become a big deal because we make it this big deal. We don't try to understand, like, why does someone do that? What's in our nature? And a lot of times we separate ourselves from animals. We are an animal. We are animals.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to act like animals. And how did we stop acting like animals? What happened? Why? How did we stop? How did we as a society decide that murder was no good, was not appropriate? You know, all those things are what people should be talking about, more human nature versus, you know, I wouldn't say glorifying, but making it a mystery, because there's not a mystery to this. Death happens. We are animals. Some people act out like a regressed animal, like an animal from the past, like a caveman or something. And there's reasons why we do that. You know, why do people shoot up schools? You know, why are there suicides? Those things are something, like when I got into true crime, those are fascinating to me. I want to know why we do those things, because when we know why we do them, we can start to work at helping not have them happen so much.
Yeah, I agree completely. Yeah, I think, like I said, just because his case, like, I don't know why his case, like I said, has fascinated me so much throughout the years. It's like I've never been to Wisconsin. I would love to go up there. I know my cousin, a couple years ago, he went up there, I think, to visit a friend, and they lived by there, and he stopped at the property, because the property just basically, just overgrown, just field and trees from everything I've seen. And then he went actually to his grave site, and there was I think some type of liquor bottle sitting there where, you know, basically to mark his grave, because he's buried pretty much right next to his mom, ain't he?
Yes, absolutely next to his mom. He had the only kind of stone that was different than the rest of his family. They all had the same stone except for him.
Because it seems like a lot of people, like you say, go, like I said, when he went there, you could see where people had went there. And because that was one of the actual cemeteries he went to dig up bodies, wasn't it?
That's what I hear. Yes. Yeah. Well, that's not what I hear. That's what I know.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
What I also understand is that's also the cemetery where they buried all the stuff they found in his house, like the face masks, the skin suits, all of that stuff that they didn't know where it came from, like the nipple belt. I hear they buried it all in an unmarked grave, or a marked grave, but it's not like Gein's victims. It's just like there's a little rock there. So.
That's interesting. I've never actually heard that. That's very interesting.
Yeah, I just heard it recently, you know, as this whole thing broke loose, and the person showed it and everything. So I thought that was interesting myself. I could believe that.
Yeah, kind of like you said, not really, because they know people would go there, but you know they still mark it knowing it's there. That's which I could see that. Which you like? I personally always think, like, I know, you know, with Bernice Warden and Mary Hogan, you know, those are his two victims. Everybody else, you know, he dug up. But I know there's always a speculation that he killed his brother. And I've always kind of believed that he did, just from the whole story that he gave. I know they said that he led them to the cops once he said that, you know, he lost his brother, and with the brush fire and all that. Do you believe that he actually killed his brother, just where his brother was going against their mom, in a sense?
Well, I do. I come from a dysfunctional family. Like I said, I relate to Gein with the mother thing. I had a mother like that, and so it's like I have siblings that I hate. That we you know, like there's this weird this triangulation that my mom creates between us, and so I can see that happening. I don't talk to a few of my brothers because of that, and I wouldn't go and associate them with them because I would feel unsafe around them. Yes, I do believe that. I think that's probably, you know, common. You know, like they think there's that Cain and Abel in the Bible. I bet you it's the same kind of thing.
Oh yeah, I kind of like in the monster show. They do, you know, have that scene of that, in a sense, of that happening. And I'm trying to think. I know he's technically, I can't remember how many. It's been, I need to refresh my memory. Like, I have, you know, the basics, but what was it? There was a babysitter, a little girl somewhere else that supposedly he visited at that area, and they said they found, I remember reading, what was it, like other stuff on the property that didn't match. It was like clothes or something, like at the edge of his property, because they always, I want to say a couple more people they thought he might have killed, but I always just, associated him with being fascinated with like older, women in a sense. So because the babysitter, I want to say she was like a teenager, if I remember correctly. I can't remember what her name is though.
Well, I don't know the psychology behind that, but I wouldn't put it past him to have killed, like he killed his brother, but he was into older women. So I think he was maybe just into killing. I know I talked to Helen Morrison. She was a psychiatrist that has Gacy's brain.
Mm-hmm.
She studied Gacy while he was alive. And her idea is that once you do this, once you're a serial killer, once you kill someone, you have a rush, an adrenaline rush, a chemical rush that you want to repeat. That's why it becomes serial. Because it becomes such a high, some sort of adrenaline high, that you need to keep do it again and again and again. So I would imagine Gein would kill to like a drug addict. That's what she compared it to, like a drug addict. So I would imagine Gein would kill in order to continue to have that rush of his, the drug that was his was killing. Much like people who overeat, the drug is food. Much like people who do cocaine, the drug is cocaine, right? So I think he was like an addict. That's what serial killers are. Is they become addicted to that feeling.
Yeah, there's a guy I worked on a book with actually. He was charged with 2 murders, but his sentence is set up really weird. He actually gets out. He'll be in his 70s when he gets out, and like his crimes are pretty brutal. But how it was like 120 years, but how they were sentenced, all said and done with good behavior, he'd serve like 42 years. So, and he's wanting to meet me when he gets out, and he's not that far away from me. I think the prison from here is like 5-6 hour drive, so he's not far away. And I've been talking to him for 3 years now. Like, when I wrote him, there was nothing on his case, not even a picture of him. It happened in the early 90s. I wrote him, he didn't write back, and I wrote him again, he wrote back. And like, there's a book that has like a small section of his case. It's for the whole state, and his was in that county. And his second crime involved a child. And in that book, he says, when he told police, well, he might have eventually told them, but in that book, he's like, I don't remember what I done. Well, I have letters of him telling me what he done, like the struggle of going to that house, like him fighting with an inner voice, basically, in a sense. And he talks about the high that he got, because
right.
I don't think his first victim that he's known for, he basically sexually tortured her in a sense. And he talks about, that high, once you do it, that high, you try to prolong that high the next time because you want it to last longer. And the way that murder happened, I think he killed somebody else. I've asked him, but he will not tell me because he's afraid that something will be, done if he mentions it. He just said that's between me and God, basically, if what I've done. So I'm kind of, because it seems like most serial killers, it's like their first one is always, wouldn't say an accident, but kind of an accident. You know what I mean? Like something triggered them that maybe took it too far, then it killed them, and then they got that high. Because a lot of them, talk about, just the whole, how their mind is, clicking. I know like Edmund Kemper, I know he picked up women a lot, and he didn't kill any of them. And then he, eventually did. So, but I think at one point it's kind of one of those things, like it could accidentally slip, they do it, but they were kind of planning it already. It just didn't happen the way that they maybe planned it. But yeah, the high definitely, I could see Ed Gein getting that. But what do you think his fascination was with digging up bodies? Is that just more with what? Cause I know in the show they do like the whole Nazi thing.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if one had to do with the other. I wonder. I think he was looking for human sex dolls. So he was going to fresh graves. He wasn't digging up old graves that I remember. He was like looking in newspapers. Mm-hmm. When the obituaries came out, he went there and picked up a fresh grave. And so I think he was he was lonely. and I think he wanted to bring a body home and lay with it and be with it and pretend. I think that's what he was doing.
Kind of,
and I think
because didn't he say that he never had sex with any of them? Do you actually believe that?
No, I don't.
Because I remember, like you said, I remember them talking. I forgot. One might have been, what is his name? The Herald, or the Deviant book that he wrote. I think he mentions in it that it was like he would look in the newspaper for like recent deceased women and go there and dig them up. Because I know he supposedly in the interview said they smelled bad. So that to me, even just say that he didn't, he attempted it. So,
well, I know in his transcripts that he lied a couple times. So I don't think he's going to admit to certain things that, as honest as he was, I don't think he's going to admit to certain things that are just reprehensible.
Yeah. And
that he was ashamed of, let's say.
Yeah, I could see him being ashamed of that. So in his later life, I talked to John Douglas years ago, and because he was talking to him like, right last few years that he died, and they said that he was like doing like making leather like wallets and stuff, but he said that Ed Gein didn't remember anything that he done, but they couldn't release him because his name. So do you think that he just maybe still had like a psychotic break during that time?
Well, I don't know. Trauma has a real weird way of rewiring you. He might have been saying that because he was sick of talking about it. That's all people wanted to talk to him about, and he wanted to talk about something else. He might have said that because he became ashamed of it, and he wanted to be looked at like he healed, or he was doing better. Maybe he was saying that so he could get out or have some sympathy. There's so many reasons. Who knows what's going on in someone's mind? Who knows? I wouldn't put it past him to lie about that stuff. I wouldn't put it past anyone to lie about it when they participate in a murder. That would be a scary situation. And I would imagine a lot of people lie in that situation, and you have to sort of be able to read physical movements, be able to read a lie, be able to read face, and even that you're not sure. You just don't know.
Yeah, because, like what they always say, when a serial killer gets busted, I never would have expected it from them. But like, that's what they do. They blend in. That's why you don't know how they are, because they could be anybody, because they have to blend in so well. So they're used to being, charming. They can lie their way out of something, because that's just how they have to operate. They can't, because if you see a crazy person, that person's probably going to stick with you. But if you see a normal person just walking, in a crowd, you're not going to think much of them. But it turns out, they might have killed 5 people. You just never know.
So true.
So that's very interesting. But before we wrap this up, do you have anything to add? I know, like I said, your website, that's where I ordered the book from. I know it's supposed to be out on Amazon as well. I know the Kindle version was, right?
It's the hard copy, the physical copy's on Amazon now.
Mm-hmm.
You can search it. I stole Ed Gein's Tombstone, and my website's edgeinfanclub.com. I also have a website called artworkofprophecy.com where people can find links to interviews. I'm on Instagram under Shane Bugbee. I publish under the name Michael Hunt Publishing. So those are how people can find me. I'm on X with my name, Shane Bugbee. So, I haven't enjoyed, I don't really, like I said, I stopped watching serial killer stuff because I understood what was going on, how this was going on, and I understood it. I studied it enough, and I became bored with the stories. So with these new stories, these new takes on things, and this whole different, these different generations, their take on what's going on, I find this conversation to be interesting, and I've had other interesting conversations on TikTok and Instagram regarding this. So, I'm fine. I really have enjoyed this, and I know that's weird to say. I know it's weird to say with serial killers, like I'm supposed to say I don't enjoy it, but I have. It's a fun conversation for me.